We'll be doing an analysis of the verbal ability section of the ZAT 2020 paper today. We have here a sentence completion or a fill in the blank kind of question. All right. A map is a useful metaphor for our brain when talking about dash, because at its most basic level, our brain dash to be our atlas of sorts, a system of routes dash to navigate us toward just one destination, staying alive. Okay, so going through that, what are the clues we get from the sentence? A useful metaphor for our brain. Okay, metaphor as in comparison. Okay, so a map is a good comparison, a useful comparison for our brain when talking about something. All right, because at its most basic level, our brain dash to be our atlas of sorts. Okay, that is explained in the last part, a system of routes dash to navigate us toward just one destination, staying alive. Now when you look at this, when since it talks about the brain and the comparison is between a brain and our map, right? So when talking about what, in terms of what, in terms of perception, understanding, connections, design and comprehension. Now mind you, it is all leading us towards one thing at the end of the sentence, which is that it is, something like an atlas, a system of routes dash to navigate us towards one destination, which is staying alive. So since we're talking about staying alive, it is not really about understanding, though it could be. So we'll keep that, but it's not about connections. It's not about design. Okay. Perception, understanding, and comprehension at first sight would be the best ones to fit into the first blank. Okay, so a map is a useful metaphor for our brain when talking about perception, when talking about understanding, when talking about comprehension. Okay, so let's take a look at it further, because at its most basic level, okay, at its most basic level, our brain dash to be our atlas of sorts. Okay, and then it goes on to say a system of routes dash to navigate us towards one destination, which is staying alive. So that means the brain evolved is a good word. The brain progressed and the brain metamorphosed. Okay, metamorphosed is transformed. Yes, so this is not a great choice for the second blank. So we eliminate 5. Okay, 4 and 3 we have eliminated based on the first word. Then we are left with evolved and progressed, right? So there itself, actually, I think we can go towards one, because brain evolved would be a good choice of word there. Okay, and then towards the last blank, a system of routes designed to navigate us or shaped to navigate us. Definitely shaped is not a good word in the last blank. Yes, so we can eliminate 2 also. The best choice would be option 1. We have here one more sentence completion question. Dash, mind you, there's a comma here. Okay, so that means there is some sort of transition word. All right, so dash, medicine has been operated by trial and error. So here comes our first clue from the sentence, operated by trial and error. In other words, so whatever fits into the blank has to go along with operated by trial and error. Okay, we know by now that there can be entirely dash connections between symptoms and treatments, and some medications succeed in medical trials for mere random reasons. Okay, so we have trial and error here, and then this is repeated at the end as random reasons. Okay, so for the second blank, it might actually be easier to fill in the second blank first. So we have the word randomly. Analytically definitely doesn't fit in because it is through trial and error. Okay, and it is random reasons. Statistically also doesn't work, nor does logically. So randomly and arbitrarily both fit into the second blank. Okay, then we are left with formerly and historically for the first blank. So formerly medicine has been operated, historically medicine has been operated. At first sight I know both seem okay, but grammatically speaking, you would not say formally medicine has been operated, you would say formally medicine was operated. So grammar is actually something that can help us in this particular situation. Okay, but yes, we can also look at the last blank. Yeah, we know by now that there can be entirely dash connections between symptoms and treatment, and some medications succeed. Okay, so there is that operative word succeed here. So when we choose between accidental and fortuitous, fortuitous is lucky or fortunate. Okay, so since it is succeed, Fortuitous is better than accidental. All right. So while one does seem to fit in, five is definitely the better choice. We have here a grammar based question. All right. So the question says, which of the above are grammatically incorrect? Now, here I have good knowledge of German. All right. Now, while knowledge is a an uncountable noun, right? But we have a qualifier here in the form of good. Okay. So because of the qualifier, we do not say I have good knowledge. We say I have a good knowledge. Okay. So sentence one is definitely incorrect. Except for Rajiv, everybody was there. So everybody is singular, was is also singular, right? So there, the subject verb agreement is there. There is nothing wrong with the transition phrase, right? Except for Rajiv, so that's also correct. So sentence two is correct. Whole Delhi was celebrating Independence Day. This is definitely wrong, right? So you'd either say the whole of Delhi, or better than that would be all of Delhi was celebrating Independence Day. All right, so sentence three is wrong. Neither the dog nor is the cat responsible for this mess. Okay, so this sentence is also correct in terms of subject verb agreement, because when you have two nouns or pronouns joined by neither nor either or, the verb agrees with the one that is closest to it. So in this case, it is cat, which is singular, therefore is right. All right. He knows to swim, right? So he knows to swim, is incomplete, right? All right. What does he know? He knows how to swim. There has to be a phrase that acts as what is known as the complement there. Yes, the subject. So that is, that's why sentence five is also incorrect. Okay. So there straight away we get our answer. I look forward to seeing you is correct. After look forward, right? Look forward to, we use the ing form. We do not use, you could say that after look forward, you cannot use to plus verb, right? So it's incorrect to say I look forward to see you. It should be I look forward to seeing you. Sentence six is correct. The answer here will be option three, 1, 3, and 5. We have here another grammar based question. 5 sentences that look more or less the same. There is just the difference of a verb in most of it. All right. So you had better told her everything. Okay, so this is incorrect because after had, which is already in the past, we do not use the main verb in the past tense. We use it in the present tense, or the base form as it is known as. Yes, so this should be you had better tell her, not told her. Okay, the same mistake has been repeated in option 2. Okay, so you had better told her everything. Here the difference is you will lose a friend, you would lose a friend. We don't need to get to that because here itself it is incorrect. You had better tell her everything. Option 3 has the correct form, or you will lose a friend. Option 4 says you better had tell her everything. This is again incorrect because the word order is wrong, right? It starts with the helping verb, followed by the adverb, and then the main verb, right? So that's the correct order. So option 3 is the correct answer. Option 5 is wrong because again it says you had better tell her everything or else you would lose a friend, right? It should be a prediction. You had better tell her, it is better. It's the subjunctive is used here, and what will happen otherwise? There is a prediction that is made, right? So we don't talk about the probability, we use certainty, which is will. We have here a short passage, not very long, 2 paragraphs long. This passage actually talks about pleasure. Yeah. So that's, to sum it up, it talks about pleasure. It talks about how we are bombarded with pleasure. Yes, pleasure that is attained quickly, and also the fact that it comes, there is so much of it, right? So towards the end of the first paragraph, that's what the author says. He says once hunter gatherers might, right? So at a certain point in the past, hunter gatherers might chance about honey from a beehive and thus briefly satisfy a hardwired food craving. And now, okay, we have hundreds of carefully designed commercial foods that supply a burst of sensation unmatched by some lowly natural food, right? So how it comes from something that is external, something that is artificial maybe, right? But basically we are bombarded with it, right? There is a lot of it. He starts out by talking about how for a medieval peasant, there's an example that he gives. So while the author himself was sitting in a concert of cathedral organ music, right, and experiencing the pleasure, it led him to think of how it must have been for a medieval peasant, right? It would have been the loudest human made sound they experienced, awe inspiring, right, in now unimaginable ways, because in those days it was something that was new to the peasant, right? So in the same way, now we have new things that come up and sort of completely overwhelm us with pleasure. Okay, so that is what the first paragraph talks about. The second paragraph essentially can be summed up in the first line of the second paragraph, which says, an emptiness comes from this combination of over the top, non natural sources of reward and the inevitability of habituation. Habituation is we get used to it, right? So when there is something that is the artificial sources of reward and the sheer volume of it, right? What happens is we tend to get used to it, and because of that, there is a certain emptiness that comes from it. All right. So that's what he discusses in the second paragraph. If you look at the last one or two lines, you'll again see that he sums up that point where he says, if we were designed by engineers, as we consume more, we desire less, right? So that's how it normally works, right? That the more we get, the less we want it, right? But he says, but our frequent human tragedy is that the more we consume, the hungrier we get, right? So in the case of humans, unfortunately, the more we get, the more we consume, the hungrier we want, the more we want. Which of the following options best reflects the author's understanding of human perception of pleasure? Let's go through the options. Pleasure comes from whatever we are exposed to for the first time. There is nothing of the sort in the passage, right? The author doesn't say anything about experiencing something for the first time, right? So that's not necessarily what it is. He says it is something that we are not used to, and it is something that comes in sheer volume, right? And we are completely surrounded by it. Okay, pleasure comes from what we are deprived of. Again, not something that the author talks about. It's not something that we don't have, rather we have probably too much of it, is what he says. Pleasure comes from what appears to be a valuable discovery or invention. While this one can come close, right? Let's keep it on hold, we'll come back to it. Pleasure comes from what is perceived to be extraordinary, right? So by giving the example of the peasant, he says, he uses the word awe inspiring, right? The peasant would have found it awe inspiring in now unimaginable ways, and goes on to say, no wonder they signed up for the religion being proffered. Proffered is offered. Yes. So now we are constantly pummeled with sounds that dwarf quaint organs. Yes. So what earlier would have seemed, unusual, right? That is the idea. So that's why extraordinary works well. Okay. Pleasure comes from what we are accustomed to. This is the exact opposite of what the author is saying. Right? So that also is not our answer. Now, between 3 and 4, yes, extraordinary is a better word for what the author is talking about. It's not just a discovery or invention. That makes it a little too specific. All right. So the answer, the best choice will be option 4. We have here another question based on the same passage. Going by the author, which of the following options best answers the question, how can one sustain, about sustaining the pleasure derived from any experience? Training to appreciate sweet whispers and fleeting moments of joy. Okay, so we have here the word training, okay, which is not really something the author is talking about. Fleeting moments are mentioned in the passage, but again, this this option is a good example of a word being taken from the passage to mislead us. Yes, so because of two words, we rule out option 1. Periodic displeasure with synthetic experiences leads to sustaining pleasure. Yes, definitely not. There is no sense of displeasure, right? The author is only talking about pleasure, and definitely not talking about displeasure leading to sustaining pleasure. Okay? The harder to replicate, the more sustainable the pleasure from that experience. Remember the answer to the previous question, the essence was, right, the author's perception of pleasure was something that is extraordinary, right? So that would be the harder to replicate, mimic, imitate, right? That is the idea, duplicate. The closer the experience is to nature, again, not something that is discussed in the passage, and awareness of a habituation moment helps sustain pleasure. Again, awareness of a habit. He doesn't talk about the awareness of habituation. The author says, yes, he definitely talks about habituation. He says there is a certain emptiness that comes from the combination of over the top non natural sources of reward and the inevitability of habituation, right? So again, a word has been taken from the passage but used in the option in a way that doesn't connect with the idea of the passage. All right. Which of the following options best describes emptiness? Yes. So this is where the author mentions emptiness in the first sentence of the second paragraph. What he says is an emptiness comes from this combination of over the top non natural sources of reward and the inevitability of habituation. Sooner or later, we get habituated to these things. This is because unnaturally strong explosions of synthetic, right? Not real, yes, experience and sensation and pleasure evoke unnaturally strong degrees of habituation. Okay, so that is the idea. Now, what do the options say? A feeling evoked by the carefully designed commercial foods alluring us to them. Again, commercial foods are mentioned in the first paragraph, but that is to give an example of how we are bombarded with synthetic pleasures. Yes, so that is not what the emptiness is. Okay, a feeling of absence of sources of pleasure when extent is existent, still existing sources of pleasure are still existing sources are in abundance. Yes, that's exactly what it is, right? There's an emptiness because we are, there's the combination of over the top non-natural sources of reward. Yeah, and there is the inevitability of getting used to them. Yes, but what happens because of that? There is an emptiness that comes from, meaning there is a sense of absence. All right, so option 2 is the answer. uh, just eliminating the remaining options. Yearning for newer sources of pleasure. Yeah, so it's not about wanting newer sources, it's more about feeling that there is nothing when there are actually too many things. Then a feeling of weariness, tiredness around extant sources of pleasure that are in abundance. Okay, the inevitability of habituation that one gets from repeated consumption of man-made food or foods or drugs. So here again, words taken from the first paragraph but used in connection with something from the second paragraph, but not the way the author connects them. Yes, so option 2 is the answer. Here we have a short passage. Yes, a critical reasoning based question which says which of the following can be best inferred. So what can we infer from the above paragraph? So this paragraph is quite straightforward. The author gives us certain statements, right? People who work in law, hotel and food services and technology were found the most likely to skip breakfast daily. So he gives us certain facts according to a recent study. Okay, so people working in these industries were found the most likely to skip breakfast daily. As for people who do not eat breakfast and prefer a more savory type, okay, like an egg. So he gives an example of a savory breakfast. Okay, savory as in salty, yes, salty or spicy. The study found they tend to make more money. Okay, so people who do not eat breakfast and prefer a savory type tend to make more money, be night owls and prefer cats over dogs. If you prefer a sweet breakfast like a donut, you tend to be a morning person. Okay, like rom-coms and are a dog person. Okay, so there are certain facts that are given. Which conclusion, which inference can be drawn on the basis of this information? IT professionals who eat eggs for breakfast, okay, are more likely to make money than their counterparts. Counterparts, people like them, right? Maybe in similar jobs, maybe in similar industries, right? Who eat donuts for breakfast. Okay, so we do know there is a comparison between a savory breakfast and a sweet breakfast, and we also know that people who eat a savory breakfast are more likely to make money. Yes, so option 1 therefore does fit in with the idea and is the answer. But let's look at the other options. Lawyers who eat savory breakfast daily make more money than those lawyers who have early breakfast daily. Now, this is where the comparison, there is no comparison between an early breakfast and a savory breakfast. Yes, that's why it's not option 2. Hoteliers who eat regular breakfast are more likely to make money. Yes, so here again, there is no connection between a regular breakfast and making money, right? Than those who watch rom-coms regularly. All right. So this again doesn't fit in. Among regular breakfast eaters, early risers. So here again we have an incorrect comparison. A preference for cats as pets over dogs usually is a result of eating eggs for breakfast daily, is definitely not something that the author says. Yes, so the study only says that people who do eat breakfast and prefer a savory type, tend to prefer cats over dogs. Yes, but a preference is a result. A preference for cats over dogs is not a result of eating eggs. Yes, so that's why option 5 is incorrect. We have here a poem, all right, a short one, fairly straightforward. Yes, there are certain keywords to be noted. So the first two lines do seem a little abstract. Yeah, some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. Okay, how will the world end? Yes, but yes, it says will end. Okay, from what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. Okay, so he says, from what I have experienced of desire, I agree with, I hold with, is I agree with those who favor, as in who say that it'll end in fire, or maybe even the ones who would prefer the world to end in fire. Okay, but if I had to perish twice, all right, I think I know enough of hate to know that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Okay, so we have, please note the word hate, the word destruction, ending. Okay, and then you have desire and hate, which are emotions. You have will end and destruction, which is talking about, bringing things to an end, finishing. Yeah, so let's see. Which of the following statements will the poet agree with the most? Greed can destroy one's world. Okay, so the author does say, I think, in I know enough of hate to know that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Okay, so this does sort of go along with what the passage is saying, because greed here can be associated with hate. Okay, but let's keep it on hold. Let's look at the other options. Both desire and hate can create self doubt. Now, this is where, right, option 2 starts well, but it ends in self doubt, which is now not something that is dealt with in the passage. Hatred destroys what desire cannot. It doesn't say that desire cannot, he says desire also can end the world, right? So that is incorrect. Desire overpowers hatred to control humans. Again, there is no sense of controlling humans. Ambition is more powerful than envy, right? Now, you may get envy again from hate, but we do not get that ambition is more powerful. There is no such comparison. All right. Therefore, yes, option 1 is the one that goes most along with the lines that we have, right? While greed itself is not mentioned, desire is mentioned, yes, and then there is a connection to hate. Therefore, we know that ultimately it can destroy the world. Okay, which is the most unsuitable, mind you, right? So you'll have to be a little careful with such questions. Yes, if we do not read the question carefully, we may just go along with suitable title and then end up in trouble. Yes, so the annihilation hypothesis would be a suitable title, because annihilation is destruction. All right, so that works. Love and detest. Detest is another word for hate. A tale of destruction, yes, definitely has the keywords. How the world ends. So, how does it end, right? It could end through fire or ice, yes. So, desire or hate, yes. Destruction by fire and ice, again, something that the author talks about. Emotional destruction of the world. Now, while this does seem like it has the keywords, yes, it is not an emotional, right? Mind you, we also have to look at how the words have been put together, right? So it is not an emotional destruction of the world. It is more that the world could be destroyed by these emotions. Yes, that's why option 5 is the one that is the most unsuitable. Right. We have here a short passage. In a 2017 survey of 3,915 American workers, my colleagues and I found that workers report experiencing a sizable voice gap at work. Okay, what is a voice gap? A gap between how much influence they feel they should have and how much they actually have. So that's what the first paragraph talks about. Okay, the second paragraph mentions a second study and that the same person has done, and he says in that study what the finding was that today's workers want forms of voice and representation that go well beyond traditional unions, right? So they want to be represented, they want to be heard in ways that go beyond the traditional unions, which is a form of representation. The first study defines the concept. No, it doesn't define the concept of anything. Yes, rather it talks about the findings of a study and a certain, maybe an issue or a problem that workers experience. Okay. The first study shows the intensity of the problem. It doesn't show how much there is a problem. Yes, it does say experiencing a sizable gap, but again, it is, I would say, intensity of the problem is not quite there. The second part of 2 will definitely help us eliminate it, because it says limitations of the existing solutions. No, it doesn't say that the study found that the workers say the existing solutions are limited. Rather, it says they want things that go beyond that, right? So it may not be because they feel it is limited. We don't know. Essentially, we don't have enough information. All right. The first study shows the frustration of the American workers. Okay, while we could still look at that. The second study shows the inability of unions in addressing them. No, nowhere does the second study talk about the inability. It just says the workers want something that go beyond traditions. All right. The first study focuses on the need for fair representation. Fair representation would imply that they are not represented fairly. But mind you, the study is about what they feel, right? And the second study, so let's look at the second part of 4. The second study discusses forms of representation. Actually, it doesn't discuss forms of representation, it just says that the second study found that people want forms of representation that go beyond the traditional forms. What forms they are, okay, is not discussed. The first study highlights the existence of a problem, yes, and the second study highlights the need for new ways of solving it. Yes, so option 5 sums it up perfectly. We have another short RC passage. So this passage is about refugees. All right, it's about refugees and about what constitutes a refugee. Okay, so the author does say that there is the traditional way of thinking where refugees are considered people who symbolize the violence of our time, right? But the author says it is more than that. He says it can be a state of mind, right? We need not be thrown out of our place, our land, right, in order to feel like a refugee. Sometimes he says we can be right there and we can feel like a refugee. We can feel as if we don't belong to that part. Yes. So he says it is not necessarily physical. Okay. So which of the following options is closest to the meaning of the phrase labile sense of self? Labile is changing or unstable. Okay. And this is where it is there in the passage. Let's take a look at that sentence. Okay. While the idea of exile begins to appear trite. Okay. Trite is cliched, stereotypical. Okay, in intellectual circles, an increasingly large proportion of the world is getting reconciled is used to living with the labile sense of self. Exile no longer seems a pathology is a condition, right, or an affliction. Basically, it doesn't seem like a disease or a condition that has to be dealt. Okay, displacement and the psychology of exile are in. Cultural continuities and settled communities are out. There is a touch of envy. Envy is a sense of dissatisfaction or boredom, right, about them. Okay, so what does the author mean by the labile sense of self? So essentially, the last part is where the author is saying that the idea of exile no longer. So especially in intellectual circles, the idea of exile is very cliched, right? The idea of being thrown out, being displaced, right? He says an increasingly large proportion of the world is getting reconciled, used to, okay, accepting, reconciled to living with the labile sense. Yes, the changing self. What options do we have? History does not confine the self. Now, this has nothing to do with history. Okay? Humans are not meant to be shunted around. That is not what the author is saying, right? The author is not saying that they are not meant to be or they're meant to be shunted around. Rather, he says, even if they are being shunted around now, they need not necessarily have a sense of exile. The sense of exile comes from the mind. It doesn't really come from where they are. Okay. Rather, he says they are used to living with a changing self. Yes. So The self adapts to a new geography. Yes, so this is the right option, right? And that's exactly the point that the author is trying to make. Geography does not imprison the self. Yes, so this again seems to be a good option. Geography does not, but the problem, I would say, where it goes a little beyond the scope of the passage is this word imprison. Okay, so it's not really, the word imprison is meant to mislead us because the word is, the word is refugee, right? If we make assumptions, then we can go with option 4, right? But it is a little extreme based on this passage. Yes, it is, especially when the author talks about the labile sense of self. The author is talking about how the person is no longer limited by geography. The self, the person adapts. All right, and the self does not belong. Yes, again, that's not what the author means. It's not about whether the person or the self belongs or doesn't. It is more about how the person can adapt himself. Yes, so 3 is the best choice. Okay, based on the passage, which of the following would the author most disagree with? Okay, one does not have to cross frontiers to become a refugee. The author would definitely agree with this, right? The author says you can stay in the same place, right? And you can still feel like a refugee. One does not, so it is mentioned very clearly here, one does not even have to cross national frontiers to become a refugee, right? So this is definitely something the author would agree with. Intellectuals find the notion of exile irrelevant. So this is mentioned here, while the idea of exile begins to appear trite. Okay, refugees symbolize exploitation and abuse of our times. This is actually something that the author says when he quotes another person, right? He quotes another person here when he says others like Hannah Arendt have identified refugees as virtually a new species of being who have come to symbolize the distinctive violence of our time. The author doesn't agree with this, right? The author goes on to say that no, it is not that any longer, right? So according to the author, this is what the author would disagree with, that he doesn't think that they symbolize exploitation. Okay, being a refugee is a state of mind. Yes, definitely. A feeling of alienation in modernizing societies is a common phenomenon, right? So this is also something that the author would agree with, right? Because he talks about displacement and the psychology of exile are in. From the last 2-3 sentences, we can get options 4 and 5. So option 3 is the one that the author would disagree with. Here we have an analogy based question. The author gives a certain, or rather, the question gives us another example. Project affected families, PAF, are those that are physically displaced, okay, due to construction of a large project, which could be a dam, factory, etc., in an area where the PAF traditionally resided, right? So they are moved physically from an area where they traditionally resided. Okay, the question says, with insights from the passage, what would a project proponent is a supporter, dealing with PAF, reading the following options, agree the most with? Okay, so based on the ideas in the passage, what would a supporter of the PAF dealing with the PAF agree the most? Okay, PAF as a concept is irrelevant since human displacement is a historical phenomenon, right? It's not a historical phenomenon. It can still go on. The PAF itself would be an example. Yes. Industry and government should care equally about profits and people, not something that is dealt with in the passage at all. Irrelevant. Don't worry about PAF. They will eventually resettle and rehabilitate. Okay. So while this does seem like a possibility at first sight, it's not that they will eventually resettle and rehabilitate, right? That's not the idea, and he doesn't say don't worry about them, right? Then emotional estrangement of PAF is not an area of concern. So here we have our answer, because yes, essentially what the author says is it is a state of mind. They also represent a state of mind, a form of psychological displacement that has become endemic. Endemic is part of modernizing societies. One does not even have to cross frontiers to become a refugee. One can choose to be seduced by the pull of self induced displacement rather than be pushed by an oppressive or violent system at home. Okay, so even in the last 2 3 lines, that's what the author says. Yes, he says it's emotional estrangement is not something that we have to be concerned about in terms of being physically displaced, right? Because it's not about the physical displacement. He does say, right, that they can become reconciled. So an increasingly large proportion of the world is getting reconciled to living with the labile. Yes, so they can get used to it. All right. Then PAF do not have a labile sense of self. No, that's the exact opposite. Rather, he's saying that they can have a labile, a changing sense of self. They can adapt. We have a critical reasoning question here. Which of the following can be best concluded from the paragraph? Okay. So this passage gives us facts about jellyfish. Talks about jellyfish sightings that are rather random. Okay, so jellyfish are the most, so in Australia, jellyfish are the most common between November and May. In Hawaii, jellyfish often show up on south facing beaches 8 days after a full moon. In the Mediterranean, blooms usually appear in the summer. Again, a reference to jellyfish. Okay, unfortunately for travelers, there is no worldwide database, okay, for recent jellyfish sightings, and tourism officials are sometimes reluctant to publicize jellyfish swarms out of fear that such news will scare off visitors. Okay, so so what can we conclude from the above paragraph? Celestial bodies have an influence on jellyfish sightings. So this is our answer, because it talks about the months, yes, various months. Okay, so that would obviously depend upon the movement of the earth and things like that. Yes, in Hawaii, jellyfish often show up on south facing beaches 8 days after a full moon, celestial body again, right? So that's why option 1 is the best choice. Option 2 says economic interests influence security advisories. While this does seem like a possibility, because it says that tourism officials are sometimes reluctant to publicize jellyfish swarms out of fear that they will scare off visitors, but this doesn't directly connect to the passage. Yes, so we don't know if to say economic interests, that to security advisories, yes, they can still put up warning signs and things like that. It goes a little beyond the scope of the passage. Okay. Tourism officials hide the truth about jellyfish sightings. This is actually clearly stated, so it's not a conclusion. Okay. Then seasonal variations in the marine temperature impact jellyfish sightings. So seasonal variations in the marine temperature, we don't know, right? So the months are mentioned, but temperature is not really mentioned. And tourists visiting north-facing beaches in Hawaii, right? So this is a trap option, because south-facing beaches are mentioned, but we don't know about the north-facing beaches. Yes, so option 1 is the best choice. Another short passage with a question that asks us what we can best infer from the passage. Yes, this talks about global surface temperatures. Yes, in 2019 are on track to be either the second or third warmest since records began in the mid 1800s, behind only 2016 and possibly 2017. On top of the long-term warming trend, temperatures in 2019 have been buoyed. Buoyed is supported, okay, raised, right? It can be that by a moderate El Nino event that is likely to persist through the rest of the year. This is the information we have. Okay. Option 1 says El Nino event causes global surface temperatures to rise in the long term. Yeah. Now the last sentence very clearly says on top of the long warming trend. Yes. So in that case, we don't know whether the El Nino event is the one that causes it to rise in the long term. A moderate El Nino event increases temperature more than a weak. We don't know. We don't have information about a weak El Nino event. El Nino event did not affect temperatures. Again, we do not have any information because there is no connection between the El Nino event and 2016 and 17. We only know about 2019. Okay. The long-term trend of global surface temperatures is unrelated to El Nino. This is in fact our answer. Okay. And option 5 says global surface temperatures are increasing at a constant rate. We don't, right? So again, there is no information. Yes. So constant has to have more specific information. Because it says on top of the long warming trend, temperatures have been buoyed by an El Nino event, we can infer that the long term trend is unrelated to So, another short passage. There seems to be an argument in the passage. If we can send a human to the moon, why can't we build sustainable cities, defeat cancer, tackle climate change? So go the rallying cries inspired by one of humanity's greatest achievements, the US effort that put Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon on July 1969. Okay, so which one best communicates the intent of the paragraph? Let's look at the options. America's moonshot was more about race to the moon and less about solving problems. Yes, we really don't know, right? Because we don't know what the intent behind the moonshot was. We don't have information, right? Based on the event, there have been questions that have been raised about why that can't also be done. Right? America's Moonshot Initiative was mainly a response to USSR's competing initiative. These are all trap options, yes, which if we go by general information, right, and we bring that here and we allow it to influence our choice of answer, we may look at option two, right? There is no information in the passage, therefore that can't be our answer. The reason we celebrate the 1969 moonshot is precisely because nothing significant had been done in that domain since then, right? Again, going beyond the scope of the passage. Moonshot has a definite ownership, whereas creating sustainable cities and curing cancer are a public problem, right? We don't know, right? So the last option, which says the complexity of developing sustainable cities and curing cancer is far more than sending a human to the moon, right? So this has been done, right? Sending someone to the moon has been done. The questions, the rallying cries, right, ask why we can't do these things also. So the idea that we get from this, best get from this, is that the complexity is far more than this, because this has been done, that has not been done. Okay, another short passage, yes, which one describes the politician's intent. Okay, so what does the politician say? When asked what the politician will do for the nation's economy, he attacked the opponent by saying, look at that face, would anyone vote for that? I mean, she's a woman and I'm not supposed to say bad things, but really folks, come on, are we serious? Nevertheless, we are going to defeat ISIS. ISIS happened a number of years ago in a vacuum that was left because of bad judgment. And I will tell you, I will take care of ISIS, right? See, the way you read this passage will probably make a lot of difference to which option you choose. All right. So, what describes the politician's intent, his purpose behind saying these things? To make an emotional appeal to the voters. That is definitely the intent there, right? The person wants to get the voters riled up, right? And drive home his point. Okay. To appeal to the macho voters. Yes, there is a mention of a woman, right? She's a woman, and I'm not supposed to say bad things, right? So that's why this becomes a bit of a trap word, and use fear as a tool. This will definitely help you eliminate option two. Okay. To divert attention towards ISIS as compared to the economy, right? There is no comparison there. There's no mention of the economy, rather, I think the mention, he's asked about what he will do for the nation's economy, but again, it is not diverting attention to this as compared to the economy, right? We don't have enough information. Yes. To make a sexist remark, again, meant to make us think that this is the answer because there is a mention of the woman. Yeah. And share his concern about an important issue. This is where it is not his concern, right? That comes. Okay. To digress and argue that security is more important, again, not something that is there. Okay. So option one, the tone of the passage matters a lot. This passage is a little abstract, right? It talks about knowledge. It talks about how the nature, the first sentence essentially sums it up. Yeah, the nature of knowledge cannot survive unchanged, right? Within this context of general transformation, right? So the author talks about how there is a lot of change, yes, and how knowledge also changes because of that. The nature of knowledge changes because of that. Talks about how knowledge is also something that how it can be translated into computer language, right? And in fact, it needs to be translated to computer language in order to have any sort of value, right? In the second paragraph, he talks about the exteriorization of knowledge, which is again, it no longer stays within the person. It is fed into a machine, right? And therefore is then projected out, right? So the last two, three sentences again help us. Knowledge is and will be produced in order to be sold, he says, right? So he talks about how it is made into a commodity. Okay, so knowledge is and will be produced in order to be sold. It is and will be consumed in order to be valorized. Valorized is made a big deal of, right? In a new production. Okay, in both the cases, the goal is exchange. Knowledge ceases to be an end in itself, right? Earlier, that was the belief that knowledge itself was the end. It was the goal, right? He says now it's no longer an end in itself. It loses its use value if it is by itself, unless it is passed on, unless it is exchanged. It doesn't have its use value. Okay, so which of the following statements best captures the essence? What is the essence of the passage? Let's take a look at the options. Knowledge should no longer be evaluated by its truth, but by its commercial value, right? So that is the answer to this, because he says that it needs to be exchanged, right? Otherwise, it doesn't have use value. Okay. Translation of knowledge into machine language exteriorizes it, right? Yes, to a certain extent, this is right according to the passage, though it is again using words from different parts of the passage and connecting ideas together. But this is not the essence of the passage. The essence is more than this, right? Why is it translated into machine language? Why is it exteriorized? Because it has to be made use of, right? Knowledge for knowledge's sake is no longer enough, is what the author says. Yes, so that's why option 2 doesn't work. Option 3 says suppliers and users of knowledge have become its producers and consumers, right? This is actually twisting what the passage says, right? So there is a mention where he says the producers and users of knowledge must know and will have to possess the means of translating into these languages whatever they want to invent and learn. These languages here refers to computer languages. Yes. So producers and users of knowledge is mentioned here. The relationship of the suppliers and users of knowledge to the knowledge they supply and use is now tending and will increasingly tend to assume the form already taken by the relationship of commodity producers and users to the commodity they produce and consume. Okay, so this is the mention of suppliers and users and producers and consumers, right? It's a comparison made. It doesn't say that suppliers and users have become its producers and consumers. He says suppliers and users of knowledge have the relationship to knowledge that producers and consumers of a commodity have to the commodity, right? That is the comparison that is made. Yes, so option 3 is out. Okay, knowledge shall be exclusively. This is why option 4 is wrong, because nowhere does it say that it is only produced to be sold. Maybe it's produced for other reasons also, but he says it has value now only when it is sold. Okay, market forces have taken over, nowhere mentioned, so beyond the scope of the passage. All right, so option 1 is the essence. Based on the passage, which of the following statements can be best inferred? Yes. So what do we have? For knowledge to acquire and exchange value, it should seem. This is actually a contradiction of the passage, right? Rather, he says the exchange value, the use value is there only when it has exchange value, right? So this is a contradiction. Acquisition of knowledge need no longer transform its recipient. Yes, right? So earlier the idea was knowledge expands the mind, etc., right? So there was a different idea of knowledge. The author starts from the, right from the beginning, the author is talking about how knowledge can no longer remain unchanged. Yes, and what is the one factor that knowledge can no longer remain unchanged? But it need not change or transform the person who receives it. A person can just receive the knowledge and choose to pass it on if he wants to. Yes, so that is the idea. So option 2 is the best inference, but let's eliminate the others. The locus is location of creation and accumulation of knowledge has shifted. No such discussion. Knowledge as a transactional commodity is indispensable to productive power. Again, nowhere does it say that it is indispensable, that too to productive power, right? So again, words used in different parts of the passage for different things are being connected. Mental discipline is not necessary for learning anymore, not discussed in the passage. Yes, so option 2 is the answer. Okay, which of the following options will the author most agree with? Yes, so what will he most agree with? A daughter of a lawyer must become a lawyer. Yes, no, it doesn't say, because a daughter of a lawyer becoming a lawyer implies a passing on of the knowledge. But the passage talks about exteriorization, feeding it into a machine so that it can then be passed on, it can be sold, exchanged, etc., etc. Yeah. A person with no passion for singing, if trained, will sing perfectly. While training does talk about passing on, exchanging of knowledge, right? But singing perfectly is nowhere implied. Yes. To get promoted, an unempathetic manager can learn to display empathy. So, this is the answer, which means that knowledge can be exchanged, it can be passed on. Yes. To teach poetry, one must not be a poet. Nowhere does it say that in order to pass on knowledge, one should not have the knowledge. Yes. So that's why option 4 is out. MBA program has a high exchange value but zero use value. Can't be so. It has use value only when it has exchange value. Right? So option 3 is the best choice. We have here another passage. Yes, this passage talks about how governments, companies, basically authority, makes up work, makes up jobs in order to keep people occupied, because they feel that if people are not occupied, if people are not doing something, then there is no value, right? So, which of the following options, if true, best makes the author's assertion on pointless jobs erroneous? Okay, so the author says in the very first sentence, it's as if someone were out there making up pointless jobs just for the sake of keeping us all working. And here precisely lies the mystery. In capitalism, this is precisely what is supposed to happen. Sure, in the old inefficient socialist states like the Soviet Union, where employment was considered both a right and a sacred duty, the system made up as many jobs as it had. So it goes on to talk about how he says it sometimes feels as if pointless jobs are being made up just so that people keep working. All right. Now, which one would make the author's statement incorrect, erroneous, right? That's what we're looking for. So, what he says is, let's look at the options. Workers who carry out pointless jobs are more loyal to the organization than others. All right. Now, this is what the author is saying, right? That it is a way of keeping them occupied, it is a way of keeping them tied to the authority or the organization or the corporation or whatever it is, right? That is the idea. So, option 1 doesn't make it erroneous. Pointless jobs add less value to the organization than the jobs of those who are making or fixing things. All right. So this again is the point that the author is making, right? That they add less value. Okay. So that doesn't make it erroneous. Pointless jobs decrease the efficiency of the organization. That would not make his idea erroneous, because he is saying that they are making up pointless jobs. Organizations with a higher number of pointless jobs are more profitable than those with less. Now, this would definitely make his statement incorrect, because if they have a higher number, organizations have a higher number of pointless jobs and they are more profitable, right, than the ones with fewer profitable, pointless tasks, then definitely the author's statement is incorrect. Okay, and even though the rate of increase in pointless jobs is higher, their absolute number on average is lower than that of meaningful jobs. This is completely irrelevant. Yes, so option 4 is the one that very clearly shows that the author's statement is wrong. Okay? Which of the following can be best inferred from the passage? Yes. The first one says the ruling class abhors is hates leisure so much that they encourage organizations to create unwanted jobs. This is not the point that the author is making. That doesn't say anything about the ruling class hating leisure. Okay. Keeping people employed for longer hours serves the plan of the ruling class. Yes, this is the point that the author is basically making, right? So if you look at the last 2 3 sentences, you'll get it. The ruling class has figured out that a happy and productive population with free time, okay, on their hands is a mortal danger. Think of what started to happen when this even began to be approximated in the 60s. And on the other hand, the feeling that work is a moral value in itself, okay, and that not anyone not willing to submit themselves to some kind of intense work discipline for most of their waking hours deserves nothing is extraordinarily convenient for them. All right. So the last two, three lines very clearly gives us option two. Okay. Work as a moral right is the design of the ruling class to cut down on leisure. Right. So is the design work as a moral right? No. It says that work, they use this particular idea to make sure that they can keep them working for longer hours. Okay. Then, for political reasons, profit making firms sometimes indulge in non profitable decisions. Definitely not the answer. Pointless jobs are here to stay regardless of whether they are necessary or not. Well, it doesn't say that they are here to stay, right? That things could change. He says, as of now, this is the situation, right? That for the ruling class, it is very convenient to keep people working. All right. Yes. Which of the following statements will best explain the principle underlying the theme of the passage? Okay. So the theme here of the passage is that it is convenient for the ruling class to keep people working, and for that, even if they have to give them pointless jobs, right? Because if there are people with free time on their hands, they feel that it is a danger to the organizations that create more jobs are rewarded by the government for protecting political values. This is overextending the ideas in the passage, right? Nowhere does it say that they are rewarded. Okay. Then, work is a moral value in itself. All right. Now, this is actually not what the author, this is a particular point that is made where the author says, on the other hand, the feeling that work, it is a feeling, right? The feeling that work is a moral value in itself, and that not everyone willing to submit themselves, okay, mind you, not willing to submit themselves to some kind of intense work discipline deserves nothing is extraordinary. That's an idea that is being pushed, right? That is not what the author thinks. All right. People unwilling to submit to an intense work discipline deserve nothing is again an idea that is pushed by the ruling class, not what the author thinks. Keynes predicted that a happy and productive workforce is a force for the good. Keynes is quoted by the author, but this is not the essence of the passage, right? Peace and order in society require humans to be engaged in some activity most of the time, regardless of its meaninglessness. Yes. So that's what the author ultimately says, that there is the idea that they need to be kept occupied, right? Because that's what will bring peace and order to the society. We have here a parajumble or ordering of sentences kind of question. So let's see what what the sentences say. Fast food intake for more than 3 times a week is associated with greater odds of atopic disorders such as asthma, eczema, or rhinitis. Thus, it should be definitely and strictly controlled in children as it does no good. Okay. Now, it has a thus here, which does make it seem like a better concluding sentence, but let's see. Okay. Regular junk food intake can lead to physical and psychological issues among children. Now, here you have a good starting sentence. Okay. Lack of vitamins such as A and C, yeah, and minerals such as magnesium and calcium encourage the development of deficiency diseases and osteoporosis, as well as dental caries due to higher intake. This seems like the elaboration of a particular point. Junk food, which are rich in energy with lots of fat and sugar, are relatively low in other important nutrients such as protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Emotional and self-esteem problems. Okay, so this is also talking about problems. All right. So we start the sequence with Q, okay, that it can lead to physical and psychological issues. Goes on to S, which elaborates upon the point. Junk food, yes, relatively low in other important nutrients. Okay. So the nutrient should then be mentioned, which is R. Then we go on to R, talks about various deficiencies. Also goes on to talk about the problems, which is T. Okay. And lastly, P. Yes. So option 1, QSRTP will be your answer. We have another parajumble question. Let's look at the sentences. Surabhi's Instagram profile has 1.4 million followers. It is filled with pictures of her posing in different settings. Okay. In India, reports suggest that WhatsApp, much more than Facebook or Twitter, is the primary tool for the dissemination of political communication. Okay. Political campaigns pay social media companies to promote their content. Political advertising on social media comes in many forms and remains under-examined in India. So, this so far is the best general sentence to start the sequence. Yes. And social media influencers are used for the dissemination of content. So, we start the sequence with S. Okay. That comes in many forms and remains under-examined in India, followed by R, which says political campaigns pay social media companies to promote their content. Okay, followed by Q. In India, reports suggest that WhatsApp is the primary tool for the dissemination of political communication, followed by T, that social media influencers are used for the dissemination of content, and then lastly P, which is an example of what T mentions. Yes, so the best choice, best sequence here will be SRQT,